The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 88.
I'm a doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years. I am Scottish. I can complain about things. Shush.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the classic Fifth Doctor story, the one starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor, 4 to Doomsday. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father.
How's it going?
Good, good. So I got to say, I enjoyed this episode. This was a lot of fun.
Really?
It was a good story. There were aspects of it that I always find stuff I want to criticize just because they get the science wrong or like is that really what people would do? But it's
a critic's job.
Exactly. But overall, I kind of liked the story. It was interesting, and there were layers, and I like that. What your first impressions? Just sort of an overall, and then we can dig into it. What is your impression, Jimmy?
Well, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as you did. This was the very first Peter Davison story ever recorded. They even recorded this one before Castrovalva. And the legend is that which Peter Davison himself has endorsed, but it's actually false, is that they did that so that he could kind of find his feet as the Doctor before doing the all-important, introduction episode. Because, it's kind of a make or break thing. If you alienate the audience, your first broadcast, you're in trouble. The real reason they filmed this first was they didn't have a script ready.
Right, for Castrovalva.
Castrovalva. But this story is one that it's kind of in the middle. A lot of people don't like it that much, but also it's not terribly hated.
Right.
And I'm kind of in the middle on this. It has things I like, but it also, it doesn't grab me in the same way. So I don't like it as much as other Peter Davisons. And I love Peter Davison as the Doctor. He's my second or third favorite of the classic Doctors. He's really good, but this it just doesn't grab me that much. In particular, all of the cultural performances that they have of like the Mayans and the Greeks, the Australians and the Greeks and stuff. That's just boring to me. That's just a lot a filler as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And I will fully admit, given that this might be only the third story by featuring the Fifth Doctor that I've seen, and I've liked all of them so far. It may be just I like the Fifth Doctor in comparison to others, and that might be bumping it up, especially given what comes after the Fifth Doctor. So, Father Cory, how did you feel about this? This episode?
Well, this was one of these episodes that I realized as I watched it I hadn't seen in years. Probably since I was a kid. It's just, and I'm sitting there thinking, maybe I just need to go back and do my own independent, watch through of Doctor Who, because there's some this is one of these classic Who episodes that I haven't seen in a long time. And I enjoy it. I'm a little more positive. I'm kind of in the middle between you guys. I like it better than Jimmy, and I wasn't quite as enamored as Dom either. But no, it's an episode I enjoyed. Again, it was, other than and I kind of felt that the cultural stuff, it had its place in the episode, but there was quite a bit of filler to it too. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's tell the listeners what we're talking about a little bit in case they haven't watched this ahead of time. I'm sorry, I should have done that first. So I'm sorry for interrupting, but
that's right. No, you're good.
Yeah, so it's called 4 to Doomsday. 4 as in the number 4. meaning 4 days. That comes up in the episode.
I thought it was 4 people.
Well, I mean, I think it's supposed to be ambiguous, but there is one point where they say, we will arrive at Earth in 4 days.
Yep.
So it aired in January of 1982. So, it's very much the 80s we're looking at here. And it's 4 episodes within this story. And the Doctor, like we said, it's the second story featuring the 5th Doctor. So the post-regeneration weirdness has faded. Now he's settling in. And his companions are Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan. And the basic subplot is, or the overarching plot is, the Doctor's trying to get Tegan home to Heathrow Airport to catch her flight because she's a flight attendant. And so that sort of animates especially Tegan's character throughout this. And it kind of gets a little annoying after a while. The Tegan's I got to get to work shtick, but okay, that's fine. A different annoying companion overrides that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So the basic plot is that the Doctor, Nyssa, Tegan, and Adric they arrive on the spaceship, even though they think they're going to be arriving at Terminal 3 at Heathrow.
By the way, the doctor mentions that there was some trouble the last time I was there, and that's a reference to Patrick Troughton's second Doctor story called The Faceless Ones that aired in 1966, and that was set in Terminal 3 at Heathrow.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's good. I love when they do that. They make those long, multi-decade distant connections. That's why I always ask about it. Like, whenever they make a reference to something, I always ask, like, is that a reference to something else that happened? And I'm surprised when it isn't. So they end up on board this ship, and they meet these sort of, what do they call them? Frog people. They're sort of green-skinned folk.
Urbankans.
But
they
Urbankans.
look totally like Vogons, if you've ever seen the original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series. These guys are Vogons.
Was Douglas Adams the script editor at this point?
No,
for
not
Doctor
at this
Who?
point.
Oh, okay, so maybe it was just an homage. And then they also encounter these humans, that people look like humans from different eras and places on Earth. All right, so that's sort of the basic setup for it.
And there's 4 groups of humans. There are Australian Aborigines, Mayans, Greeks, and Chinese people.
Yes.
And they claim later that the Urbankan spaceship has visited Earth 4 times to pick these people up, and they say it's happening on a certain schedule that's accelerating and getting faster. But if you do the math, it actually doesn't work out to these 4 groups, especially the Mayans. They're in the wrong time period to be picked up. Right.
The Mayans were much later than in fact, the Mayans would have been after the Greeks. For that, at least for that period of, for the Mayan civilization to exist. So that was a bit of a they didn't do their work. I compare this to the Aztecs, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and the Aztecs. We talked about how they did their research, and it was very I feel like later on, as Doctor Who went on, they got less concerned with that historical accuracy and more of just waving a hand at it.
Their educational remit faded.
Right, exactly. Now it's just entertainment. So the interesting thing to me that at the very beginning of this episode was how Adric was flying the TARDIS. So he was in charge. He was in control. He was, in fact, I think the Doctor refers to him as the navigator or something at this point, which will actually come up in the next New Who we watch, because the Doctor refers to, Martha Jones asked the Doctor, don't you have like a navigator or something? And so I thought that was
just me.
Yeah, just interesting. But in this case, he's got this, teenage boy navigating for him. And so they get on board, and then the Doctor, there's no atmosphere outside the TARDIS in the ship. And so they wear these helmets, and these helmets become a huge part of this show, of this episode. And it sort of looks like it's probably, in fact, a motorcycle helmet, open face, with a sort of little like face breather that just comes down in front of your mouth and nose.
Yeah,
but it's not enclosed.
No, and obviously they got, the classic 1970s, early 80s, gold sparkle motorcycle helmet you've seen, all over the place.
Right. A little Evil Knievel action going on there.
Yep.
And so they start exploring outside the TARDIS. Although I think the Doctor goes out first and leaves the companions inside. And there's this interesting interplay between Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan. Like I said, Tegan is very impatient to get back to Heathrow, and Adric, like he's like, no, this is straight. I know I've called things misogyny in the past, and we've waved them off as that's just the way people were. Adric is a punk. Toward Tegan. The problem with women is they're mindless, impatient, and bossy. I'm like, that boy needs a spanking.
Yeah. And not just his character, but the actor too. Matthew Waterhouse was notoriously difficult behind the set. He, among other things, I mean, he's like a 17, 18-year-old kid at this point. And he told Peter Davison during the filming of this story that he would never be able to follow Tom Baker. And later when there was a famous actor guest starring on the show, Matthew Waterhouse gave him advice about acting, and I saw a quote from Janet Fielding, who plays Tegan, saying, that Matthew at this point in his life had no humility, none.
I wonder if the script writers were just like, hey, let's show the world how Matthew really is, and give him some red meat. He does.
Incidentally, Peter Davison has confirmed that this about Waterhouse, but says that it's because of the situation he was thrust into, that he was, this young kid who had no acting experience, and suddenly he's put on this successful show. And he said that's going to go to anybody's head. Right.
Yeah. Being a child actor, I mean, look at all the history of child actors, especially famous ones, and the trouble that they've all gone through. Yeah. So it's hard to blame him at this age. I'm sure if he's still alive, yeah. I'm sure this maybe is a bit embarrassing for him today, hopefully.
Well, and if you want to follow the further adventures of Adric, they're available on Big Finish.
Yeah. I wonder though how much of the parts of the script where Adric kind of gets shown up, gets knocked out by Tegan or gets told off by the Doctor. How much of that was as much the actors doing it as it was?
Well, that's an interesting aspect, because there were points of this where I was like, this doesn't make, like, Adric like buys the Urbankans spiel. Like, the Urbankans are talking about they're coming to Earth and they're going to they're bringing their gift of themselves to Earth, and their idea is they're coming to take the Earth from humans, wipe out the human beings, and settle it for themselves. But Adric, so he buys it so quickly, hook, line, and sinker, and he's obnoxious about it. Like, I mean, it was, that part was like one of the things that I felt was hard to believe was how quickly he just sort of, like, without outside influence, without, like, drugs or hypnotism or some sci-fi explanation, he just sort of like, well, hey, I've been traveling the Doctor, he's my friend, but I'm going to believe these guys that they're the best because why?
Yeah, this is one of the things that is most hated about Adric, is the fact that he turns traitor at the drop of a hat. I mean, this is not the first time. I mean, just back in Castrovalva, he was like seeming to work with the Master. And even before that, like shortly after he was first introduced in State of Decay, he's like agreeing to become a vampire, and Adric just turns traitor incredibly quickly.
Right. And there's a reason why all fans cheer when they get to that point where the Doctor calls him a young idiot.
Yes. That was a particularly satisfying moment.
On the other hand, notice what we've got here that we haven't had before on the TARDIS is conflict within the TARDIS crew, which actually represents an advance in the complexity of the writing, because now we have a much more complex group of characters to work with that don't all just get along all the time.
Right.
And it was, I did like at this moment, like where he calls them impatient and bossy. He recommends that Tegan read Bertrand Russell, or Bert Russell, I think he calls him at the time. Yeah. He's a famous mathematician. But at the same time, Nyssa is actually reading Principia Mathematica, whose co-author is Bertrand Russell with Alfred North Whitehead. And it's like, you just called women, mindless and whatever. And Nyssa comes off as a very interesting character in this, and because we've seen her in a couple of things now, but she's a very interesting character. She's very smart. She's also very even keeled, which I think is supposed to be because she's not from Earth and she's different culture. But she's less likely to kind of fly off, sort of like Tegan does at some points. But I think she, how do I put this? I think she effectively refutes Adric's attitude, which might also be an attitude that you find among some sci-fi fans, that women are expected in sci-fi to sort of be the screamers and the eye candy. I think she does a good job of sort of being more than just eye candy on the TARDIS, but she's effective.
Right.
Incidentally, go ahead, Father.
I was going to say, she kind of is portrayed as kind of the classic aristocrat. Yeah. The kind of a proper British aristocrat should always have their be composed and, proper bearing and everything. And she really kind of portrays as that.
Yeah. But also with a spiritual dimension, because she's from a very spiritual culture. This was almost Nyssa's last story, because there were plans to write her out in this episode.
I could see that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure at what point. I haven't been able to find out at what point she was going to be written out. It could have been the point where they start to hypnotize her and turn her into a robot, but that would have been really dark. And my suspicion is because they established she's an expert in cybernetics, she would have stayed behind at the end of the episode with the 4 leaders to help build society on a new planet. Right. But what happened was Peter Davison said, no, Nyssa is the character, is the companion that most fits my vision of this incarnation of the Doctor. I really, really want her to stay. And they gave in. And so Nyssa ended up staying, and Matthew Waterhouse ended up being the one to die a few episodes later. But this explains what happens at the end of the story after they finally, everything's resolved. They get back on the TARDIS and suddenly Nyssa faints. Right. Well, the reason for that is because they already had the next episode written, and it was written for just 2 companions, and they didn't want to rewrite it. So they had Nyssa faint and spend that story recuperating in the TARDIS.
And she gets a vacation.
Yeah,
basically.
So the couple interesting things that kind of happen right off the bat is, one of them is that the TARDIS gets identified as having a molecular structure consistent with the planet Earth. Is that because of the camouflage circuit?
Assume so. Maybe. Yeah. It could also just be because it's been there a bunch. It's got earth dust on the outside. I don't know.
Well, we also find out that Tegan is apparently both a stupendous artist. Like here, she draws these little pictures of current Earth fashion that are just are almost photorealistic in a few moments. And she's Aborigine, because apparently everyone in Australia speaks Aborigine.
Well, not just Aborigine, but ancient Aborigine.
36,000-year-old Aborigine language. Yeah, that's incredible.
That the TARDIS doesn't translate. Like, the Aborigine is the one language that doesn't get translated. The Urbankans get translated, the Mayans, the Chinese, and the Greeks, but not the Aborigines, which is, I thought was
too old for the TARDIS, but not for Tegan.
I guess. Wow. She is quite the companion. the Doctor and the companions, they get separated from the TARDIS. We have TARDIS separation and companion separation at points, both points in this episode. Nyssa gets taken one place. Adric wanders off to find the Doctor because, that's what he does. And they encounter these apparent humans, and we find out that they're not actual humans, but they are robots, very, very mechanical robots, very clockworky robots, who've had the personalities and memories of the original, we could call them abductees, sort of like UFO abductees, downloaded into these 3 integrated circuits. And like that looks like something out of a 1982 era Apple IIe or something, Just
Yeah, well, you're lucky to get the 3 chips. That means you've got free will and are less robotic. But if you're one of the lower class robots, you only get 1 chip that controls your motor skills and apparently doesn't give you the gift of reason and free will.
Right. There is actually a technical point here, which I thought was kind of amusing. They say that the reasoning chip has circuits linked by lines 100 nanometers thick, and we're supposed to say in 1982 I looked it up, semiconductors were packed with transistors in 1.5 micrometer density. That's much bigger than 100 nanometers, but today it's 10 nanometer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought Intel was down to 18 or 10 or something like that.
It's down to 10. They've got a path to going to, I think they said 7 or 7.5. So it's like another one of those, past future technology. Another thing where
at least they were trying.
Yes, they were, and then they thought it out on paper. But another area where there was sort of like the past future, where they talked about there were 3 billion people on Earth and 3 billion Urbankans coming to Earth, and there's no way the Earth could support 6 billion people. Now, in case you don't know, the Earth has over 7 billion people on it right now. So it's sort of those are a couple funny moments for me.
Well, I love it too. You see, I always wonder when you see a microchip or, electronics like that, where they show the bare electronics, where they harvested it from. They didn't make all those props, like the face or all the components inside the face. Where do they harvest it? And then you look at he's punching on the computer, and that had to be a BBC Micro. Because that was a computer that came out that the BBC was big in promoting for computer education and so on. So that keyboard came from like a BBC Micro or something like that, some equivalent at that time. They just went like an off-the-shelf system that they then built the set around, basically.
By the way, I like how when they're walking around in the airless bays in this spaceship where the robots are working on stuff, and Adric and Nyssa are wearing their oxygen helmets, they're nevertheless trying to talk to like the Greek guy banging on the keyboard. And you can hear him banging on the keyboard. It's like, wait, there's no oxygen here, guys.
What's going to carry this?
There's no atmosphere, so the sound should not carry. Right, exactly. I also noted that there was when they went into the floral chamber, which apparently is the only place where there was organic life on board, according to the sensors. Adric, who knows everything about math, can navigate the TARDIS, has no idea what photosynthesis is. This child's education is sadly siloed into one area.
And it's really unusual, too, because he grew up in a swamp and is natively a swamp person that has just taken human form.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So also, he is photosynthesis. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the way that at one point they're trying to figure out how long it's been since the Greeks have been there, because the Greek guy Bygone, which is a really weird name.
Yeah. Well, let bygones be bygones.
Yeah, it's got a Greek ending, but I don't think that's a real Greek name. I'd have to look it up. But Bygone says he's been there for 100 generations on the ship.
Yep.
And which is a really, how do you know if no one's been reproducing on the ship? But the Doctor and Adric are working out how long that's been. And Adric says, well, how long is a generation? The Doctor says, I don't know, 25 years. So that would mean, and Matthew finishes, is like 2,500 years. And I'm going, Matthew can multiply by 100. Give that boy a badge for mathematical excellence.
Yeah, exactly.
He is a math expert, So and ultimately we find out that the 3 billion Urbankans that are on board this ship are really personalities and memories that are stored on microchips in these file cabinets. And I have to say, Adric is really like obsessing about the 3 billion on board the ship. There's several scenes where he just spends the entire scene going, "There's 3 billion people here somewhere." Like, all right, dude, calm down. It's like, how could 3 billion people fit on a spaceship? You mean like the TARDIS is bigger on the inside? Like,
yeah,
it's not unheard of. It was kind of funny that they had him doing that. But there's this. I feel like there were a couple of themes for this episode, and one of them is that technology itself isn't evil; it's the way that it's used. I felt like that was a key theme of this episode.
And Bygone expressly says that at one point,
right? Yep. And they kind of demonstrate it by how the robot people that have reasoning and free will use that eventually to turn against the Urbankans and to rebel against them. But they also talk about that there's a moment where the Monarch, so you have 3 Urbankans, basically. You have the Monarch, the ruler, and it turns out that he's actually organic, even though partly organic, even though the censors didn't. It contradicts what the censors said earlier, but they never go back to that. So I was kind of thought that was interesting. And then there's his assistants, Persuasion, and what was the other one?
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment, right. Yeah. Very interesting named. Persuasion is sort of the secret police sort of guy. So Persuasion, quote unquote.
What they do after they've taken, so initially as Urbankans, they look like frog people too, but they become attractive, stylish 1980 yuppies under the influence of Tegan's drawing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And we're eventually told that their names, Persuasion and Harmony, are short for their titles. I'm sorry, Persuasion and Enlightenment are short for their titles, Minister of Persuasion and Minister of Enlightenment.
Right.
So they head Monarch's government agencies, the Ministry of Enlightenment, which would be the propaganda department,
right,
and the Ministry of Persuasion, which would be the secret police.
Yeah. Right. Very 1984-ish, the Orwellian sort of names for it, which is, we can't discount the influence of Orwell at this point, by the way, in 1982. As we were I remember as we approached 1984, the date that the book took place, there was a lot of references in pop culture, direct and indirect, like this would be an indirect reference, to 1984-ish Orwellian sort of language concepts. And I think this is one of them.
David Bowie had a song about 1984 that was famous and stuff. I remember when 1984 was like 6 or 7 years away. It seemed like, wow, that's so far in the future.
Just like a reminder, 2000. We'll never get there. Year 2000.
Yes, folks, we're old. That's just a reminder. That's what it is. So now another really interesting reference, external reference or pop culture reference, comes when the Monarch explains the nature of love. The nature of how they conquered death by integrating their personalities and memory into machinery. And Nyssa asks, "Well, what about love?" And Enlightenment defines it and then the Monarch's like, "What are you talking about?" And Enlightenment defines it for him as the exchange of two fantasies. Yeah. Which is a quote from the 1939 film The Rules of the Game, or La Règle du Jeu, directed by Jean Renoir, and it depicts upper-class French society and their servants just before World War II, showing their moral callousness on the eve of their impending destruction. And many people consider it the greatest film of all time, actually. I haven't seen it myself, but I read an article about it in response to this. And in several places they talk about it when people make lists of the greatest films of all time.
Interesting.
That shows up at the top very often. And I could see how the way that the movie describes it, the French upper class pre-World War II was like a lot of like we sometimes talk about the 1920s in America, sort of detached from the consequences of actions. I suppose in some ways, like The Great Gatsby depicts some of that.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because the way that the Urbankans are portrayed in this, they're also detached from real emotion, from and especially from love. And so when they have to have love defined for them, they proclaim it the exchange of two fantasies, which is, you know, a skeptical view of love at the minimum, shall we say. So I thought that was interesting anyway.
Yeah. By the way, another reference, one that Americans probably won't catch because it's a cricket reference. There's a moment where Peter Davison is talking about why he's got a cricket ball, which becomes important towards the climax of all this.
Right.
Because we have a really great but ridiculous scene involving the cricket ball. But when they're setting that up, he mentions, I used to bowl a very good Chinaman. And at the moment he says that, he looks at Bert Kwok, who's playing Lin Futu, the Chinese leader.
Yes.
And so a Chinaman in cricket is an uncommon way of bowling the cricket ball. It's apparently a leg spinner who bowls from the left hand.
So almost like in baseball, it would be sort of the equivalent of someone who throws a screwball or that
exactly.
sort of thing. Okay,
it's considered hard to do.
It was a funny moment because the doctor looks distinctly uncomfortable having just said something so politically incorrect. In front of. Speaking of Bert Kwok, by the way, who plays Lin Futu, he's probably the most famous actor in this episode, of the guest actors.
Peter Davison.
Other than Peter Davison, but of the guest actors. And folks may wonder where you might have seen him before. If you've ever seen any of the Pink Panther movies, he played Kato. The whole time he's there, I kept wanting to yell, "Not now, Kato, you fool!" Inspector Clouseau. I loved those movies as a kid, and I still do. So it was awesome to see Bert Kwok there. Playing Lin Futu. So then we have an interesting moment where Tegan is fed up with everything here. She's fed up with the doctor not taking action. That now that they know that the Urbankans are going to go, they're on their aim is to destroy Earth essentially, or the Earthlings, the humans. She's fed up with the doctor, and she decided, I'm going to take the TARDIS and fly back to Earth. Not sure how.
And strand them out in space and time.
Well, especially given how Adric, who apparently is supposed to know how to fly the TARDIS, ended up inside the spaceship instead of at Heathrow Terminal 3, that she thinks she can do it. And she's got this manual, this awesome TARDIS operations manual, which is really kind of funny that there is one. And she's like,
and this is like Dead Tree hard copy.
Yes. And it's about 1,000 pages. I mean, this is a thick book, and she's like paging through it, looking for the on button, and the whole time she's sort of like randomly flipping switches and pressing buttons, which to me that I would think would be a bad idea. Yeah. And crying in frustration until finally she gets the thing activated and dematerializes about 8 feet outside the spaceship.
At least she moved it, and that's impressive.
That much is impressive.
Well, they did kind of say that the TARDIS had been drawn off course by some kind of magnetic something or another on the ship that caused it to land there instead of Heathrow. So that could be the explanation why it didn't actually go anywhere.
Right. Yes, but she it just felt like, why are you trying to fly this thing? Like, this is a bad idea.
Well, this is another thing that made it hard for me to get into this episode, but I do like it when she's like crying and frustrated. It's nice acting from Janet Fielding. Also, I like the part where she gets so frustrated, she throws the TARDIS manual on the floor and kicks it and then gets up on top of it and stomps on it.
Yeah.
She was mad. That was good. I like that.
I like Tegan, but not at first. When before she leaves the TARDIS and come back.
Yeah.
I hate that. I did not like her when she was, I got to get back to my job. I got to get back to my job. I got to get back to my job.
Right.
Yeah.
When she comes back, she's a much better character because they get rid of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, she's a willing traveler, and she's not fighting the audience's expectations, because we, the fans, would love to travel on the TARDIS.
Right.
So when you have someone constantly talking about how they don't want to be here, it's like a total buzzkill for the fans.
And we get that sometimes in New Who. We got that with Mickey at first, and some of the other sort of secondary companions who get dragged along and who complain the whole time. There's apparently a temptation to have a character like that on board.
And for variety, it can work, but you need to, like with Ian and Barbara, they were kidnapped.
Right.
But they reconciled to the situation and came to appreciate it. And Janet Fielding did too. It just took longer than it should have.
Right.
And she was too shrill about it in the meantime.
Right.
I also... She actually mentions at one point her poor aunt, who was driving her to work that morning when they were abducted by the Master, and like her aunt got killed, and she kind of a throwaway. I'm like, I suppose when people are traumatized and grieving, sometimes they focus on the things that they can deal with as opposed to things they can't deal with. So she focuses on getting back to work as opposed to the fact that her aunt is dead. But it did kind of jar me a little bit. Like, why aren't you more upset about your aunt being dead than about being late to work? So I don't know. I get, but I as I say that, I guess it could be kind of that she's traumatized.
Well, and she kind of threw it out as a slap. It's like
at the doctor.
At the doctor, just kind of slap him upside the head. By the way, do you remember this happened?
Right. So let's all pile on Adric again, because he's just such an easy target in this episode. So he gets this idea that, wow, wouldn't it be awesome to be made into a robot that can't love? Like, he kind of gets this idea that he would love to do this. And then he's like a blabbermouth about everything related to the Doctor and the TARDIS, and like, oh yeah, it's the TARDIS. And you can't really get in unless you have the key. And Tegan has the key, but if you got inside, it's huge inside. You can fit everybody in there, and you can take it to Earth instantly. Like, shut up.
Well, and Nyssa says that,
right?
And he completely ignores her.
Right. And then we get another scene where the Doctor they're in their guest room. With the bubble wrap sheets. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Oh, yes.
The bubble wrap showing up again in Doctor Who. And the Doctor had this noise device that was, masking their speaking so that they couldn't be spied on. And as soon as he turns it on, he turns to Adric and goes, "Now listen to me, you young idiot. You're not
that was when they went into the rec room. They made it all nice when they were in the guest room.
Oh, right.
Let's go check out the recreation." And as soon as they're in the rec room, now how did I had that looked up? And it's like, young idiot, you're not so much gullible. Now listen to me, you young idiot. You're not so much gullible as idealistic. I suppose it comes from your deprived, delinquent background. It's just like, just keep it up. This is better than the Picard. Shut up, Wesley.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
Oh,
one.
Yeah. There comes a point in all of these 80s sci-fi shows that feature children too brilliant for their own britches, where they need to be put in their place. So
surprisingly, back in the 60s, Will Robinson was remarkably humble despite being an electronics and engineering genius.
Yes. And still is apparently in the 2018 version of Lost in Space.
Haven't seen that one.
Yeah, but still humble.
I wanted to rag on Monarch in connection with Adric, because Monarch seems to be a really ineffective monarch. I mean, he spends almost the entire story sitting on his throne chair thing and not moving and issuing bellicose declarations, like instructing people not to tell the characters anymore. It's like, that's enough. You don't need to tell them anymore. Do not tell her anymore. And then they get told more, and Monarch just goes along with it. And he's, now these characters have gone too far. And then he lets them go farther.
Right.
It's nothing. He takes no action. He's constantly threatening to do stuff. He never does.
Well, then he thinks he knows what's going to happen. So, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and this is going to go here, and this go there, and then does it. doesn't work that way at all.
Right.
And then towards the end of the story, he gets up out of his chair and strolls around the spaceship, issuing more bellicose declarations, and then goes back and sits down again.
Right.
and for some reason, he's obsessed with winning Adric's favor. I mean,
yes.
Now on screen, they say he wants Adric to be on his side so that Adric, being an organic, can hoodwink the people of Earth into buying into the Urbankan plot. But Adric's not even human, and you've got human-looking robots that actually know something about Earth. I mean, if the only way they would know Adric is a human or is organic rather than a robot is if they ran a test on him, and if they ran a test on him, they're going to find out he's not human.
Right.
So and how is this one boy going to swing world opinion? So
especially one so obnoxious.
Exactly.
Monarch is just incredibly overinvested. It's like he's sparing the Doctor's life and stuff just so he can get now the boy will be on my side for sure.
Yes.
What?
Yeah, the Monarch is particularly ineffective throughout this, and that's a knock on him, and maybe a knock on the writing a little bit, because you want to have an effective villain that makes the victory that much better. So he is particularly ineffective. So now let's get to the visual that everyone probably remembers from this episode, which is
this is all I remembered from when I saw it in the 80s.
So we talked about Tegan, materialize the TARDIS outside the spaceship. So the Doctor's got to get into the TARDIS because there's no way Tegan's going to bring it back. She can't figure it out. So he has to go out into space and float between them to the TARDIS, and he ends up. He's got one of those helmets on, which are not all that effective.
He's got like 6 minutes of air. They establish,
and of course, he runs out of time because the Urbankans are interfering with him. And
by the way, this is the first physics mistake in this scene because he's got like a cord that is linking him to the Urbankan spaceship. And they untie the cord, and that causes him to lose all of his inertia and stop flying towards the TARDIS.
Yeah, that was a little confusing. Like, it should be just you tied the cord. So now it's supposed to be a safety line in case he misses the TARDIS. But if he doesn't miss the TARDIS, it doesn't matter. He has to be untied anyway. So there are other times when we see the Doctor in space, and we establish that the Doctor can survive without a spacesuit for periods of time. We see that in the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe, where the 11th Doctor was able to survive for some time. And then in the most recent
Capaldi.
most recent series, Oxygen, except he went blind from it, being exposed to space. So, but it is established that Gallifreyan Time Lords can survive in space for a period of time.
And anybody can, but just seemingly a little longer than us.
Right. Although, is it a myth that the whole like your eyes will pop and your blood will boil instantly?
It takes a number of seconds. You can survive. One of the big problems is if you hold your breath, you're going to rupture your lungs like crazy.
The pressure,
Yeah, so what you need to do is expel all of the air in your lungs, and you can conceivably survive for a very short period.
Okay. So he does make it eventually, of course. And then we get around to this. There's been this poison that's they've been harvesting from poisonous tree frogs that they have on board the ship for some reason. And
wait, are we going to finish up with the cricket ball in that scene?
Oh yeah. Well, let's get back to the cricket ball. Yeah.
So what happens after he loses his inertia is they try to do something clever, and I give them points for that, and it's a great visual, but it also doesn't work in terms of physics. He takes out his cricket ball, he throws it against the Urbankan ship, and when it rebounds to him, it pushes him towards the TARDIS.
Right.
And this
almost, guys, but not quite.
Almost. Really, he would have started moving towards the TARDIS minimally when he threw the cricket ball. but when it returns, it's not going to have any more force than it did when it left him.
Right.
And so really this wouldn't happen, but points for trying.
Yeah, right. The key thing is the cricket ball, throwing the cricket ball would have started it moving, and that's what they should have done. And I would have accepted moving faster than he really would have. That would have been okay. But the rebound being what pushes him was nope. So sort of jumping to the end here. Our Bankins have been harvesting this poison from tree frogs. Do we remember why they were harvesting it? Like
to kill people on Earth by miniaturizing them, because a trillionth of a gram will totally shrink you to microscopic size.
This is one of these absolutes where this is like the absolute most deadly poison ever known in the entire universe.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not just a new Who thing. It shows up in classic Who as well once in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And also a needlessly complex or complicated weapon against, instead of just like zapping people or whatever.
At least they didn't tell us that it's 5 billion times more toxic than strychnine or something.
Yeah.
Right. So the Doctor engineers this revolution against of the human-like androids against the Bankins, against the Monarch. But right at the end, he very quickly, very kind of cavalierly poisons the Monarch.
Yeah, he's got this bottle. It's like the size of a large Coke bottle or something, and he just throws it at the Monarch, and who's out of his chair again, and the Monarch starts shrinking down immediately, and he actually doesn't die. You think he does, but if you watch closely, he stops shrinking at some point, and the Doctor says he's partly organic. So apparently that's why he didn't shrink all the way. And then the Doctor puts one of the oxygen helmets on him and pats it on the top. So apparently Monarch has survived in miniature form. But wait, haven't you established a trillionth of a gram or something would kill a normal human being, and you just splashed this stuff at the Monarch
like
with
an
no
8-ounce
protection
glass.
for you and your buddies? I mean, a trillionth of a gram is going to float around in aerosolized form in the air and kill you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So that another inconsistency in it. We really didn't talk about like the Monarch's true plan, which was to go back in space and all this other stuff.
He wants to travel faster than light so he can go back in time and meet himself at the beginning of the universe because he's convinced he's God.
Right. And there's not much to say about it. It was kind of a
tacked on.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the rest of the story. It didn't seem to fit. And so it was kind of an odd, like, I don't know, maybe we needed to, again, play for time and expand out the 4th episode of this or something.
Make it seem more cosmic and something.
Right. It was. Yeah.
Well, it did kind of feel like a poke at Star Trek, because Star Trek kind of popularized this idea of, you do the slingshot effect and go faster than the speed of light, and you'll go back in time.
Right.
And every time they meet a god surrogate on Star Trek, it's somehow bad.
Yep.
Right. Was this before or after they did the slingshot, the slingshot on Star Trek?
Well, they did it in the original series.
Did they? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Gary 7 episode.
The movie itself that did it was
Voyage Home.
Yeah, and that was
86.
86.
Yeah, I think it was 86.
So I mean, so that was it was after the Apple Macintosh came out. I know that because they used the Macintosh in it. But
transparent
it wasn't the movie.
How quaint.
Yes. Well, actually, it was the keyboard that was quaint. Transparent aluminum.
I know. I was mixing two different lines.
They actually invented transparent aluminum? I don't know if you
Yes, we have it now.
We might have talked about that before.
How do we know that guy didn't invent it?
Exactly.
I love Scotty. Anyway, now that's a companion for the Doctor. Scotty would be awesome. So, all right. So that's about it. I mean, so we get to the end, and then we talked about, Nyssa fainting away in the TARDIS control room after they get take off. The androids are going to fly the spaceship to another world and colonize it. Yeah.
By the way, a couple of really short notes. I like the Doctor says early on when he's asked what he's a doctor of, he says, "Well, everything really." Right. That's nice. There's a bit where they've had a robot. I like how all of the cultures except the Greeks have dancing as their cultural display, and the Greeks have wrestling and fighting. But all the others are dancers. But at one point they've like stabbed a robot, and this is where we first learn they're robots, because it looks like they've just stabbed a guy to death. But then they take the guy and put him on a table, and he's got like a cut in his torso from the stab wound. And they lay him down and a bright light shines, and then he gets up and his wound is repaired, but his shirt is not, so we can still see the wound. The wound's gone. Finally, at one point when they're trying to rescue, when the Doctor's trying to rescue Adric and Nyssa in an oxygen-deprived environment, he says, it's okay. He's got helmets for all of them but him. And he says, it's okay, I can go into a trance to reduce the need for oxygen until you can get a helmet ready for me. And he proceeds to do the trance of hyperventilation. And he's just like breathing in and out all the faster. It's like, guy, I don't think you know what this word means.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Peter Davison should have got a little different direction on that. One thing that actually came up is that this episode establishes the date of Logopolis and Castrovalva, what the date they occurred, because Tegan says she was trying to catch flight A778 at 17:30 or 5:30 on February 28th, 1981. So, which actually was the day that Logopolis was broadcast. So they were trying to establish that. Now, I don't know whether there was an actual flight A778 out of Heathrow on that date, but there might have been. I'd like to think there was. So, is there anything else we want to say? We didn't talk about the Monopticons, the giant balls with a glowing light on it that act as video cameras.
Yeah, I thought those were overused because they, the Doctor kept having to disable them, and he kept doing it in different ways. Yeah, some of the time, but not other times. And I thought it was a nice idea to have those, but I think they kind of overused them. Yep. And because they proved to be, like Monarch, they proved to be very ineffective. They don't work anytime, you don't want them to. Right. I mean, and this is another thing, like the Doctor disables the first one by putting a hat over it. And that's a nice moment. But then Monarch is such an ineffective leader. He doesn't have any robot go remove the hat. Exactly. It just stays there for for like 3 episodes. Yeah. Also, I'm not sure if the Monopticons were superimposed or not. I didn't see strings on them, and they looked pretty good. Yeah,
I got to say that I think they were added in post as special effects, and they did a pretty good job with it in that case.
They were definitely better than the green screen behind the ship.
Or the green screen hood that Bygone uses when he raises up his robot face. You can clearly see that his real face is just being is still there, and they're just raising up a green screen.
It slides up instead of, or kind of cuts off as it's sliding up.
The face doesn't actually move. Yes, or when he opens up his chest cavity with the little fabric opens up, and there's the green. They've got a green screen on his chest for the robot stuff inside. Although at a later point, they must have had him like stand behind a practical effect as he reached in to grab the chip in his chest.
Right at the first cliffhanger. Yeah, that looked more real.
Yes. Okay, so I think that's all we probably have to say about this episode. I think maybe I enjoyed it so much because I could really take it to Adric because he deserves it.
There will be more.
I look forward to that. So, folks, what do you think of this Fifth Doctor story 4 to Doomsday? And do you disagree with us on Adric? And is he in fact the greatest companion ever? I know there's someone out there who thinks that Adric was the best companion. So, and I want to hear from you. So let us know by going to sqpn.com and leaving a comment on this episode's listing there, or go to the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave us some feedback on the post there. Or you can send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. You can find an in-order, production order listing of, or airing order listing of all of our episodes in the order that the original episodes we're talking about aired at sqpn.com/TARDIS archive. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just go check it out and see what we got there. I'm pretty happy with that, providing that service. Yeah, it's really kind of fun. You can find links to all our personal social media and websites on our show notes at sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 10th Doctor story, the first story of the second 10th Doctor season, with a new companion, and the episode is called Smith and Jones. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening, and remember, we need doubt. It's the greatest intellectual galvanizer.
When will I see you again?
Soon, I expect. Or later. One of those.